All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to the James Spearman Show. Today we've got another guest. In this show, what we like to focus on is the people in aviation, how they got started, and then the aircraft that they own. So today we've got Dr. Lee Collins. He's been a close friend of mine and a great customer over the past few years, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to bring him in and have him share his story on our show. So, Lee, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
So talk to me a little bit about what's your background, Lee? What do you do on a daily basis? What do you do for work?
I'm a cardiac anesthesiologist at Park West Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee.
That's awesome. And you're managing, on average, how many departments, how many people?
On average, usually 5 ORs plus another area or department of the hospital, and then we just kind of help each other out in all the different areas. But I'm mainly focused in on the hearts. You know, patients having heart surgery. But yeah.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome. I normally only do bolts and wrenches. I can't do people. So, okay, you're an anesthesiologist and at a really high level. At some point, you decided you want to start flying, and everyone that I've encountered in aviation, myself included, has had this like moment where it sparked, and once you're hooked, that's it, for life, essentially. So what got you hooked?
Oh gosh, my earliest memory, always wanted to be a pilot. Always was fascinated with airplanes, little model airplanes, military planes, the little balsa wood with the little paper and the little twirly rubber band airplanes and gliders. And, I totally geeked out with Star Wars, wanted to be an X-Wing fighter pilot when I was growing up. And then, of course, the Top Gun movies influenced me as well. But I've always wanted to be a pilot. My dad worked for Delta. He was a ticket and gates agent in Knoxville. And so I was always at the airport watching planes, taking pictures of planes, trying to learn about planes, all the different types of planes. So my earliest memory, I've always wanted to fly.
That's awesome. And so your dad was around airplanes, got you in it early, and then your other family members are also in aviation, right?
Yeah, my brother, he's a UPS pilot he's a captain with UPS, but he started as an air guard pilot, just like you, at McGee Tyson Base, KC-135s. So he was always always looked up to him, always wanted to go through pilot training with the military. But I was told, like, when I was 16 years old that I didn't have perfect vision, and back in those olden days, they weren't doing waivers. So I kind of gave up on that hope. I was trying to go to the Naval Academy and fly with the Navy. And so it all worked out, but I kind of gave up on that dream and pursued biology, medicine after that, and then, did a career in medicine. And then finally, a few years back, I said, once my kids were older, I'm going to fly. So,
Do you fly with your brother?
yeah, we do occasionally. He's funny. He likes to fly with me. We have a really good time. But the way he put it in perspective for me is like, Lee, you asking me to go fly is like me saying, hey man, let's go hang out at the hospital on my day off.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I get it. But we'll go up and do some aerobatics, and he totally loves that. And his wife and I and Laura, we all flew up to the Ohio game with UT Ohio, so we have a blast. I love flying with him. I mean, he's got 20,000 hours as an airline captain, so I mean, it's pretty awesome flying with him.
How much GA experience does he have?
Oh, probably, let's see. I'd say it's less than. Well, I don't know. I have to ask him. He may have a couple thousand hours, but yeah, the ratio is mainly big planes and jets.
Yeah, I assume probably your plane is the only GA plane he's touching
right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
His
son was flying, and Jack was flying, and so they were in a club, and they were flying some Cessnas and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. The guys at the guard base, we all fly the tanker 707, and trying to go from like an airline-sized airplane to a GA airplane is extremely difficult, and it throws off your sight picture.
Oh, yeah.
And so all my bros from the base, we come in and they're flaring 50 feet high and stuff. So I assume that's what your brother's probably experienced.
Yeah. When we're landing, he's like, "Whoa!" He doesn't say anything, but he tells me later. He goes, in my head, I'm going, "Pull up, pull up, pull up."
Is that, you get to be like, man, you need some work. Is there like a competition going between you two?
Oh, it's funny. He doesn't. So I've wanted to kind of transition, like, hey, man, let's get you, tooled up in the Saratoga, so you guys can take it out. And so I think he's when he gets close to retirement, I think he'll be more interested in getting up to speed in GA and maybe flying that around. But yeah, he was happy to fly right seat and work the radios and just give me all kinds of pearls and wisdom, tools as we were flying. So that was awesome.
Let's see. How do you do on the radios? Normally they're so used to saying their UPS call sign or something.
Yeah, seriously.
He can't get it
It
out.
took him. He's like, "This is UPS." November 8128 Quebec. I mean, every time we made it a joke. I mean, every time he goes like, "I'm even staring at it. I'm staring at the placard. I'm still saying UPS 1234."
Yeah, we normally have bets with the guys when we go fly with the guard and be like, how many times, look over at them and be like, how many times are you going to say Delta tonight?
Yeah, exactly.
How many times are you going to say American? We'll set bets off of how many times they're going to mess it up. They'll take a grease pencil and write it on the window.
Oh, really?
Right. Our call sign, the tankers in Knoxville, is always soda. From historical reasons, but so our call sign's soda, and they'll write it on the grease pencil so they can look at it before they say.
That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the same. He's the same way. It's always we joke about it. It's always UPS.
Yeah. So one of the topics I usually like to touch on is because a lot of our customer base are people that are like you. They're successful individuals, and they got to the point where they can start buying back their time. And an airplane is a time machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but it can seem extremely daunting when they're let's say they're 30s, 40s, 50s, working at a really high level job. They own a business, or they're a director level, essentially where you're at, or at a management level, and trying to carve out the time to take on this really big task of trying to get their private pilot's license. When did you start flying, or when did you decide you're going to go out and get your ratings, and how did you kind of manage that between with you've got this super demanding job too?
Like what year?
Yeah, how old were you when you decided to take this plunge?
End of 2017. So that's been, it's probably a little over 6 years ago. So I was 46.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I think for example, me, when I started flying, I had no expenses, and I was less than 20 years old, right? I was 15, and then when I got back to finally finish my pilot's license, I had all the time in the world, no other things. And then when I went to Air Force pilot training, that was my number one job, was only doing that, which made it a lot easier for me. But I assume other people that have the money and they're contemplating purchasing, let's say a 4 or 6 seat plane where they could start getting their time back, it's doable.
It's doable. Yeah, as long as you don't rush into it.
Got
it's
it.
Doable. You walk before you run.
Yeah.
It's doable.
How did you? I assume probably there was somebody that kind of took you under the wing to show you the process to go through to do this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had I started out just like any other private pilot. Taking one lesson, and then it might be a week or two before I could take another. So your first 10, 15 hours, you're repeating lessons until you get kind of past a core nucleus. That's why it takes you more than the 40 hours, to get your private, at least when you're older, just because you don't have the time to spend on it. But, I had a good flight school, AVZ over here in Knoxville. I'll give them props. They started me out with a good basis. And the owner actually kind of was my broker when I started getting close to getting done with my private, I started about thinking about doing a purchase. And so started talking to him using his years of experience, because I didn't know that many people in aviation at that point. My flight instructor, Matt, really picked his brain. So you use your flight instructors, you start to, get a network of people. And, for me, it was like in medicine, when you become a doctor, you either decide, are you going to be a medical doctor or somebody that, a surgeon? It's your two kind of, forks in the road. And so like with aviation is you're going to get a high wing or a low wing, are you, and this is where I say you need to learn to, to walk before you run. The next big thing is, what's your mission? If you just want to beat up the pattern and, you just got you and your friends or whatever, your wife, and you don't really have a lot of family, or if you've got a family and you want to do cross countries, what's your mission? That's the other thing. And for me, my mission was, I want to be able to take, 4 adults and put anything they want to pack in there, or 2 adults and kids and put, just if the doors will shut, it'll go. And I want to be able to go a little bit faster. I don't want a plane that's too complicated, because, I'm a low-time pilot at that point in time, and maintenance costs. So that I talked to my brother a lot, because he's like, "Are you going to go multi-engine, single engine?" He goes, "Remember, multi-engine, that's two engines you got to take care of, twice the cost." And he's like, "Are you going to go fixed gear, or retractable?" And he goes, "The expense on retractable is, it's high." And so I picked his brain a lot, and that got me into this Piper Saratoga. It's a 300 horsepower engine, relatively fast cruise, and fixed gear. And I didn't want the complex, I didn't want to have to worry about new pilot and landing gear up. And so that's a progression of, walk before you run. And I tell you what, I got really lucky. The owner, the broker, put me in contact with a sales guy, Eric Washler of, I forget his company name, but he's awesome. Found this Piper Saratoga, and I tell you what, I get advertisements all the time, people trying to buy my Saratoga. It's the fixed gear Saratoga is the most sought after plane for families. And so it's continued to increase in value. And so I really got lucky. And so I went non-turbo fixed gear for my first purchase. And I think that's always a solid purchase. If you go beyond that as a GA under 200 or 300 hours, you're asking for trouble. Your insurance rates are going to be sky high. That's the other thing that you don't factor in. I paid for my initial insurance, it was like $5,000 or $6,000.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, you're a low-time pilot." Can you imagine if I had retractable gear or turbo or any of that fancy stuff that you don't really need?
You'd probably be at like $15K a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah. So insurance costs, maintenance costs, and mission. And so for me, it was fixed gear, 300 horsepower Saratoga, and it's been great. And I've got over probably close to 600 hours in the plane now. And my insurance costs are, they're probably $3,000, $2,000 a year. So it fits my mission.
The more hours has your rate come down as you gain hours?
Rate has come down as I've gained hours, and then my next mission objective was to get my instrument rating. And your rate goes down dramatically when you're an instrument pilot. And so just from a standpoint of training and cost, every GA pilot should strive to get their instrument rating, because it makes you a better pilot. And your insurance goes down, and it allows you a wider range of mission objectives. So that's the other thing is, like with you, in the military, you're training. You guys have qualifications and stuff. Like once you're a GA pilot, every 2 years, it's like it's all up to you. And if you can get lazy.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm continuing trying to learn. I've got my instrument, working on my commercial. I'll get my commercial, then I'll get my CFI, then I'll get my CFII. I'm gonna work on until I can't fly anymore. I'm gonna continue striving to get more ratings and training, and I try to fly 200, 250 hours, which for me is a lot, considering my job and the requirements. So that's kind of my stepwise.
Yeah, you unpacked a ton that's really
That's
good
a ton,
there.
yeah, a ton.
But all of these things are really good, and a lot of it boils down to a mindset.
Yeah.
You're top of your game, like anesthesiologist, or you're at the pinnacle of your profession, right? And someone, and most of the people that are successful enough to purchase something like this, they're in that same boat. And so normally the mindset that you have to can-do attitude, I'm going to get things done. A lot of those are things that the FAA identified as like, oh, these are human factors that get people killed, right? So kind of the macho man mentality.
Yeah.
And so you have to, and I've seen people take a really bad approach, and then I've seen other people take an approach like you where you're thinking, okay, just because I'm, a great whatever, in your case, a doctor, that doesn't make you where you know everything about airplanes. And so you did it really smartly where you're like, I need to find people that can help coach me through, how do you even buy an airplane? Where do you get training? I'll have customers give me a call and they'll say, hey, I got a wild hair to buy a plane. I'm going to buy it sight unseen. They've not considered insurance. They've not considered are they going to be even able to maintain proficiency on this plane? They haven't considered any of this, and they're like, it's just like a boat they're going to take out on the weekend. And so, so if you're going to start in this, I would say take the mindset that this is different, right? This is completely different, and try to find the professionals. The AOPA is a great resource. I'm sure you use them a ton, right?
A ton. I've leaned on the AOP. If you're a pilot, you need to be a member of the AOPA. They have helped me through every facet. Aircraft purchasing. They've helped me put me in contact with title companies to research titles for this plane right here, because I didn't use a broker. I did this on my own. The AOPA they have so many resources, and you hit the nail on the head in terms of you don't want your doctor balancing, doing your financial planning, and I didn't want to be a cliche. I didn't want to be a doctor killer. I didn't want to go and buy. I mean, most doctors get their private pilot's license and they buy a complex high performance aircraft and then they kill themselves. And I didn't want to be a cliche, so. When I leave the hospital and I go out to the airport, I'm a pilot first. And just like in medicine, there's stuff I can't control. And so I have to do everything I can to minimize my risk and risk to others. And that's through training, being humble, reaching out, getting advice, and knowing your personal minimums. I guarantee you, maybe a large portion of pilots don't think about their minimums day to day when they're flying. As a GA pilot, and that's huge because you'll get yourself in situations where you'll get killed or kill somebody else just because you got comfortable. And what's the most dangerous time they say for a private pilot newly minted? 250 hours to 450.
Yeah, right when you start to build a little bit of confidence.
Confidence, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the kill zone.
And so what I would say to people coming in and buying a plane is take it slow. This is something completely new. Try to find professionals. Get a hold of groups. YouTube nowadays is just there's all there's a lot of great content creators out there that have almost every topic. Try to consume as much as you can, and just like you did, and have a more of a humble mindset and conservative one, because ultimately it's not just yourself. You're taking your family in this plane, probably your friends, and not to mention, depending if you do have a crash, you could put this thing in a neighborhood and affect multiple families, right?
Yeah.
So just slow it down. You're already saving a lot of time by flying.
Yeah.
Make conservative decisions, and what you did is actually the best spot. You got your private pilot's license, and then took a step that's reasonable, not going straight to. What did you train in initially to get your private?
Like a 172.
172.
A Piper Warrior.
So you didn't go.
22.
You didn't say, okay, now I'm going to buy a Baron, a twin engine, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go there fast. And then people are like, Haley, that's a really bad idea. And you're like, well, I don't give a crap what you think, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about. And it's funny to bring it up, but I have people say that to me all the time.
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
I see it all the time.
They'll go buy a bear inside unseen with no pre-buy
Yeah.
inspection.
Yeah.
And they have no clue that it could have liens against it or any, whatever. And they're like, well, I didn't know that. And it's like, well, there's people that are doing this on a daily basis that you could talk to.
Yeah. Well, had I not had that experience, if I just, went out on my own, I wouldn't, this had a lien on it. Mm-hmm. And I contacted a title company and they searched and, we got that all cleared up.
And it wasn't anything malicious from the previous owner. He didn't even know
he
because
didn't know he had it. Exactly.
he didn't do a pre-buy or use a title company.
Yeah. So, it was no fault of his. He was like, what? Are you kidding me? And once he found out, he fixed it. He's a really good guy. He got it.
Super nice guy, yeah.
He got it fixed, and so it wasn't a big deal. But yeah, it's little pitfalls like that. And then the maintenance. That's another thing is like, for me, I guess I get this being in medicine. Preventative maintenance prevents, catastrophic failures. In medicine, if you control your diabetes, you control your hypertension, your cholesterol, you don't smoke, you can't do anything about your genetics, but you can lower your risks of coronary artery disease, and you can apply that to anything. Same thing with maintenance. I can't tell you the number of pilots I hear they get their maintenance out of a pickup truck, and I'm like, you're a smart guy. You got a wife and you got a couple kids. Like, what are you doing? And when I can't afford to do the maintenance, that's when I have to hang it up, because it's not only my life. I'm putting everybody that fly with, and plus everybody on the ground. It's maintenance. That's the other big factor in aviation aircraft ownership is figure out what the maintenance costs are. And they're going to be more expensive than you'll ever imagine. And there's reason for it. We did a podcast on why. Yep. And there's reasons, but it's an important thing to factor in.
Yeah. One tip that somebody told me that they use, it just as a general thumb, if your budget is $100,000, you might find a plane around $50,000, so that it's never it's never a thing where you're like worried about, okay, should I do the oil change, or should I change this pulley, or should I do this at annual? It's more of a, no, yeah, we need to do that so I can stay alive. There are caveats where I'll say, with an experienced shop that can identify to you, okay, all this stuff needs to happen. However, here's some things that are, they may be coming due, something you might know about. Instead of just getting a new part on this, maybe we could send it off for overhaul, from a reputable shop. Those are ways that you can make smart, educated decisions. But, trying to barely afford the plane by skimping on maintenance is extremely dangerous and short-sighted. Again, right there. So, yeah, and what we're describing is, if you're kind of in middle-aged person and you're thinking about purchasing an aircraft to buy back time, it is doable. You can start working with a flight school. Once you start working with a flight school, you'll start getting involved with the instructors. The instructors will normally know the shops, and then the shops will typically know the brokers, and then the brokers will introduce you to what you need to know next, which is using an escrow company. I highly recommend doing a pre-buy for the airplane. Now, I will give you a caveat from the inside of the my tips on pre-buy inspections are, sometimes I'll have customers that come to me and say, I only want you to look at X, Y, and Z. And I'll say, Mr. Customer, happy to. I'll just look at X, Y, and Z. Then something down the road happens, and it was outside of X, Y, and Z, right? And then they're upset with who did the pre-buy. And it's like, well, you just kind of asked them to do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, you should have seen the whole plane. I was like, no, you asked me to do X, Y, and Z. The only way to fully know where an aircraft is at is to do a full annual inspection. And so I do recommend that if you want to know exactly where the plane is, you pretty much have to do a pre-buy annual inspection. The pre-buy inspection, there is no requirement by the FAA. So you could say, just check the logbooks over for me. And maybe you got a deal good enough where you just don't care what could come after. So, hey, just make sure X, Y, and Z. done just the logbooks. I've done as much as just walk it around, kick the tires, check the tire pressures. It seems, cosmetically fine. But I would at least recommend having, at bare minimum, check the logbooks, make sure the right engine is on the plane. This is funny, but I've actually had ones where the wrong propeller was on the plane, wrong engine was on the plane, and that's a huge mistake, right? If you miss that. And now you get to your first annual and the shop says, hey, this is the wrong engine on this plane. Mm-hmm. That's like 50 or 60K, right? You're just out.
Well, there's nightmares galore with planes, and if you, the longer I'm in this, the more I see people, other shops, pilots just cutting corners, and you don't know what you get. You don't know what you get, and especially for that first, put it to you this way, on that first purchase, that first plane purchase, you're going to be so excited you found a plane, but if you're hesitating and doing a full inspection on that plane and paying the inspection fee to get the full inspection like it would be for an annual, then you probably need to second guess whether or not you can afford the plane. Because if you want to scrimp on that, you're going to constantly be complaining about everything later down the road, and it's not going to be enjoyable for you, and you're going to put yourself in a dangerous situation. So find the plane that you can afford and that you can pay the, $2,000 to $6,000, $7,000 for inspection, depending on the plane. Probably most
depending
GAs,
on the plane, yeah.
To get that thing thoroughly inspected, because it's too risky not to. And then use the AOPA. They've got a plethora of stuff online, and you can literally call them up and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a plane. I'd like to talk to somebody. They're like, oh, let's put you in contact, and they will walk you through it. Huge resource.
Yeah. My last caveat there is, or not a caveat, but really just tidbit. The maintenance shop, the better the job the maintenance shop does, the more they'll find, right? Mm-hmm. So having a maintenance list come back from an inspection where there's 2 or 3 things or 4 things, you might wonder, did they actually look at anything? So you want somebody that's detailed and do a good job and show you where the plane really is. I'm not saying you have to come to me or anything like that. I'm just giving you the tidbit as you may be in Oregon or somewhere else. You want a shop that's actually looking at the plane. You should see a lot of discrepancies come back. The engine on these planes, at your plane level, and most people are going to have a 6-cylinder, 310 horsepower, horizontally opposed, and it's a lot more vibration than what's you're used to in your car. And that vibration as you fly causes things to come loose or chafe or whatnot. And so all of those things you should see on your annual inspection. So,
well, another thing about this pre-buy, it saves you a lot of headache in terms of, okay, here's scenario 1. I want to buy this 1981 Piper Saratoga that looks real pretty. It flies real nice, and I'm thinking about moving forward. James, I want you to do a pre-buy on it. Will you check the engine compressions? Maybe do an oil change, and I don't know. Look at the magnetos. I hear just kind of look at the engine, and just make sure the engine's good. Because if the engine's good, then probably everything else is fine. Okay, I'll do X, Y, Z. And then you buy it in your first annual. You've got all this stuff that needs to be fixed. Why didn't I know about that? Scenario B. Hey, James, I'm thinking about buying this Piper Saratoga. I'm going to go ahead and pay you the $4,000 or $5,000 for the inspection fee. And you're going to say, that sounds great, Lee, because with that inspection, I've got detailed lists from Piper Aircraft, and there's, let's say, 125 items that I need to check that's going to thoroughly look at that plane. So there's no guesswork. You don't have to worry about whether I did the magnetos or I checked this or I checked that, or you come back to me in 2 weeks. Hey, did you look at those pulleys that do the things that make the things do this? It's all done. It's all done, and it's there. And rest assured, you've looked at everything.
Yeah, but, and not to mention, normally that squawk list that comes through from the pre-buy, now you're in a better spot to take it to the seller.
Exactly.
Right, because 1 year from now, you're going to be upset at the seller that he skipped all that or whatever. So at this point, you could say, take this squawk list back to the seller and be like, okay, how about let's go meet in the middle, or things that you've been skipping every year. I kind of like that. Those should have been done. Kind of like that to come off the price of the actual sale. You can go back and negotiate. That's normally how that happens. The inspection happens. I present the squawk list. They go through it. They go through their negotiation phase. They either walk or move on. Most of the time, I've actually never had one just fall through. They're pretty committed at that point.
Yeah.
It's very rare. Well, I personally never had them just like, no, I don't like this plane anymore, and walk away.
Yeah.
So it's rare.
Yeah, and there's little things that you can pick up on in the inspection that you don't even think about, like, hey, the ELT battery needs to be changed, and it hadn't been changed, and it's out of date by a year or 6 months, or the mags need to be overhauled because they're past their 500 hour. That's stuff you don't think about as a first time plane owner. It's not even on your radar to even think about. That's in that plane that needs to be looked at, that could be out of date, or they wanted to skip on the maintenance, or they're robbing Peter to pay Paul to get this thing to keep it, and you just don't know.
Yep. So, it's a great learning experience, and I would recommend, going with when they present that list, have your mechanic go through each item and explain to you so you can understand, and ultimately just learn the systems of your plane and kind of get an idea of like, okay, ELT, when's that come due? Oh, okay, I can have that in my head, So huge learning curve, really just an airplane ownership altogether.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, you start with learning, right? Find a flight school where you can start taking some lessons. Then they'll start connecting you with the other pieces, and then the type of plane, whether or not you can afford it or not, go conservative, right? So yours is like maybe a medium step up from a 172, where you still we're adding in 310 horsepower, so it is high performance. However, you don't have to worry about the gear. Rules that out. You have the propeller and the throttle. Maybe the propeller is completely new. That's a new system you may have to come to terms with. However, it's a moderate step up. It's not an extreme step where we're going to twin engines and retractable gear.
Yeah.
Not smart.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then I wanted to give a plug for a second too. Just we talked about the AOPA. We're not endorsed by them in any way. So I'm just telling you as tidbit. They're really good, but one that is really neat, and it's impacted me and you. Still not taking any money from them, just as FYI. But I wanted to give them out because it'll take us into our next topic. Because you started flying, and then all of a sudden, you bought your plane, you built up, like a couple hundred hours, right? And then now it's time you want to take the next step. And talk to me about the T-34 Association. What have they meant to you, and what have they done to help you out?
Oh, yeah. Well, who doesn't dream about flying a P-51 or a Corsair, or a P-47? And, I never could afford those planes. But I love history. I love World War II aviation. I love military aviation. That's always kind of been a thing that I've always wanted to do, is fly for the Navy. And so it's just natural for me to want to get into the Warbird scene. And a good friend of ours helped me out, Neil, up here at the Aviation Museum. Got me, just took me under his wing, and I thought, I want to fly a T-28, big radial engine, just a workhorse, just like an old, 62 Corvette or Camaro, right? And that's what I thought I wanted, and he quickly just kind of reset my sights on that, because he's like, I don't know if you want this thing leaks, and the radial engine, the parts, you'd be better off getting a T6. And I was like, okay, yeah, T6. How do I get a T6? Let's get a T6. And so he's like, well, you're probably not going to be able to just, jump into a T6 because the insurance, unless you can insure yourself, it's going to be pretty pricey. And I was like, oh, okay. So, all right. So, yeah. Okay. So maintenance, T6. Okay. He goes, have you thought about a T-34 Mentor? I was like, what is that? He's like, well, it's like a Beechcraft Bonanza. And I was like, oh, okay. Cool. Okay, cool. Yeah. And so he took me flying in his T-28, and he's like, this is just like flying in a Mentor. And he showed me his Mentor. I was like, okay, cool. I'll get into the Warbirds, basically buy a Bonanza, and then I'll get a T6. And he's like, yeah, that's a good plan, Lee. Good plan, Lee. And I was like, okay. And so it's another one of those things, walk before you run, right? And so he helped me find a T-34 that was here at the airport, and that's this plane right here. Of course, it didn't look like this when I bought it. So, but that's how I met James. James was doing the annual on it, and Mike was putting it up for sale. Of course, I fell in love with James and his story, and that's another podcast. But now he does all my maintenance. And so, long story short, purchased the T-34, started flying it, and I was like, man, this is cool. I can do aerobatics in it, which I love. That's another side story about GA and instrument training. Give a prop to John Burt, but we'll talk about that. So I got into the T-34, and then there's an association, the T-34 Association, and they're a group of guys and girls, and they put on these flying clinics. There's a lot of them out there, NATA, the T6s, the T-28s. But you have to get a fast card. If you want to fly formation, if you want to fly in air shows, you got to get a formation safety training card. And the only way you can do that is go to these fly-ins and fly with these guys. And most of them are retired military, ex-military, and it's very much like being in a squadron, is what they tell me. It's like what it was like when they were in the squadron flying in the military. And so I totally was like, ooh, sign me up, let's go. And these guys and girls just took me under their wing and taught me everything about the T-34, all about formation flying, and they're a huge resource, and I can't say enough about how awesome they are.
Yeah, my first introduction with them was this plane behind us. It lived in a hangar for like 5 years or something. It only had like 0.5 hours on it over the 5 years or something.
Yeah.
And it stayed in a hangar, and it was nice. But the previous owner calls me up and says, this is when I was just getting going with my shop. I didn't have anything else to work on. And I had, some friends that had worked on T-34s to help me learn. And then, but I needed to get the manuals. I needed to, get training. And I worked on Bonanzas a ton, so I was like, this should be, I've got resources, and, I feel confident. He's like, well, how about this? Just help me bring this thing back to life, and then find somebody that's going to buy it from me, too. I'm like, sure, okay, whatever. So brought it in, did the annual, and needed manuals, and it's similar to a Bonanza, but it's not a Bonanza, and so you need the manuals for it. And luckily, I found the T-34 Association, and I just called the number. Mm-hmm. And the guy's like, oh, you're an API? Okay, cool. So here's what you need. You need this, 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 and this, and this is what you might encounter and that. I mean, they really walked me through
everything.
Yeah, everything. So much. Helped me get up to speed. Here's the manuals. Here's where to get them, all this stuff. And they helped me a ton, and we're still, I'll run in. Obviously, I normally work on Cirruses and other planes a little bit more modern. So with this, I'll run into things that I've never seen before, or most people haven't, and I can call them, and they're like, "Oh yeah,
technology from the 50s."
Yes, here's what you need to do. And the funny thing is, on that plane, so I went through and did the full annual, got it back to life, and I did tons of full power runs. On the ground, it was running great. And a really close friend of mine back then, his name was Dave, I was like, hey, come out and check me out in the plane. We need to do, well, number one, we need to do a maintenance test flight, and I want you to check me out as a CFI. And so we did the initial test flight. It was fine. And then the second flight, the same day, we decided we're going to do touch and goes. And on about the third touch and go, I bring the gear handle up. Sorry, it's on this side. Bring the gear handle up, and the engine just immediately blah, 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 just completely. It doesn't fail completely, but I have a significant power reduction. And the gear, I mean, at that point, you're already rotated off of a touch and go, and the gears come up. By then, I mean, you're kind of crossing the other threshold, maybe at let's call it 100 feet, maybe, or less. I hadn't even crossed the threshold yet. But obviously there was there was definitely not enough space to try to elect to land straight ahead, which what I might have done if it would have happened quite a bit sooner. Or if on initial takeoff, I would have just, pitched the nose back over, hit the gear handle back down, landed straight ahead. But this time, we're about to cross the other side's threshold, and there's the trees. And the engine's just blah, 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 blah. And Dave's in the back, James, that doesn't sound good. I'm like, yeah, I know. And a rule of thumb that people say, like, hey, if the engine's doing anything, don't touch the throttles because it's doing something. And whatever you do could cause it to, completely fail. In that moment with no altitude. Obviously, if we were at 8,000 or 10,000, we'd do a lot more troubleshooting. Yeah. But we're just barely clearing the trees and maintaining an altitude and airspeed. So just leave it alone. And Dave had multiple engine failures back in the 70s when he was doing crop dusting and stuff. So he was kind of coaching me through that. But he's like, James, don't touch anything. Don't touch anything. And I start just barely a gentle bank to start coming back to the airfield, maybe 5 degrees. So it's just enough airspeed energy to stay, to maintain airspeed and altitude. And I was like, well, you want it, man? He's like, no, you got it. And so I brought it around about the time I hit crosswind, or actually the downwind leg, engine just clears up. And it's fine. Climb up to pattern altitude. It's totally good. That was the closest I've ever been to. Well, no, not the closest I've ever been to crashing, but that one it's up there.
It's up there.
It's up there.
It's up there.
So I landed, and it definitely a shot to my confidence because obviously I just brought the plane back from manual, and I was so upset. And me and Dave walk into the hangar, and I just sit down, and we're dead silent. He's like, "Well, you'll get it figured out, James. I gotta go." So what I learned was, in most Beechcraft airplanes, they've got fuel bladders, and those bladders can have ripples in them, and regardless of how much you sump it, until you get the plane out moving around, it's not going to move those water pockets to the sump. Yeah. And so it's pretty extreme. I mean, you'd have to have significant amount of water buildup. This one was one of those cases where it sat for 5 years. Yeah. So until I got it up and started doing touch and goes, it finally worked that water in. But yeah, I called the T-34 Association. They actually were the ones that were like, yeah, man, those that thing's got bladders, right?
This is what happened. Yeah.
So a really good resource, especially if a lot of people are interested in Warbirds, and the T-34 is a great start. This was this actually was an Air Force trainer, and so the story on those planes are great. So, okay, so you got your private, you purchased the Saratoga, and then you got how many hours before you decided, you know what, I want to have some more fun, or maybe take the next step to where you're going to move to now a retractable gear aerobatic aircraft?
Oh, gosh. I think I was at I think I had to have been. I was probably close to 400 or 500 hours.
Yeah, you had quite a few, or you built up the confidence, and that's good that you didn't just immediately just roll right into it. Right, had some patience, built up your confidence, and then what has this plane been? Learning that and taking you because the next few hundred hours were in this and the Saratoga.
Mm-hmm.
Does this make you a better pilot?
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, it's the whole thing. Training to, proficiency and doing, doing the next more complex thing, and just flying the retractable gear aircraft, and so high performance retractable gear plane, and plus, I consider the mission for this plane is aerobatics and formation flying and cross countries, and so this allowed me to fly aerobatics, and it's not something. I was lucky. Not many. There's probably 0.1% of GA pilots that get a chance to train and do aerobatics, and I was lucky that the pilot that did my instrument training, John Burt, F4 pilot in the Navy, flew for Eastern. He's got bazillion hours. He mandated that if you did private pilot training with him, and then instrument training with him, you at least had to go through a basic aerobatic course. And for me, it was like throwing the rabbit in the briar bush. I loved it. But he did that for upset recovery and for it just makes you a better pilot. You learn the envelope of that plane. If you go up and down, fly straight, you don't learn the envelope of the plane. And when you get in trouble, if you have crosswinds, you have this, that, you're scared. You don't know what the plane's going to do and how it's going to behave. But when you do aerobatics, you know the envelope of that plane. You get yourself in situations and you get yourself out of them, and you're doing rolls and Immelmans and spins. They don't do spin training anymore, but by God, I can spin a plane and I can get out of it. And so that's what this plane allows me to do. And then, you take it to the next level, formation flying. That was something you guys did routinely as a military pilot, and you still do.
Yeah, still do.
And GA pilots, you don't even think about it. Most people don't even want to get that close to a plane. But I've got a screw loose, and I want to do it because it makes me a better pilot. And plus, the military thing, I love it. And so that's what this plane has allowed me to do, is just take my skills to a higher level, because there's going to be a day where I'm flying and I'm going to have an engine out and the plane, or I'm going to get an unusual attitude and I'm going to need to get myself out, or I'm going to do something that I need to fly the plane, and this experience is going to allow me to do that. I do extensive training in engine failures. I read a lot about it, and I train a lot, and I subscribe to the military training. You got a high key, low key, and I train in both planes on how to get that plane in. What's my high key point, where I want to land if I have an engine failure? Where's my low key point? Most GA pilots don't even think about that, and you should. You should be training yourself to do that, and that's what this plane allows me to do, is missions that most GA pilots don't get to do.
Yeah, there's a ton in there too, right? So, you're taught about, through your private pilot training, what a spin is, and that it can kill you, but you don't. It's a thing. You don't really understand truly how it works until you start doing it. So I'd recommend really any customer to get at least some aerobatic training and understand really especially a spin. What is a spin? What gets you into it? What becomes the most dangerous parts of it? Skid versus a slip, those things. So and makes you a better pilot. Really.
It makes you a better pilot.
Such a better pilot.
We don't teach stick and rudder as much. You don't teach, coordinated turns. You've got to really, learn to feel by the seat of your pants what a skid, what a slip is, and know how it feels to go into spin. Because when you're low and slow and you're behind the power curve and you're turning, base to final, and you try to yank that over, you'll start to feel before it ever happens that, oh, this is not good. I'm skidding. I'm about to, and you'll look up and you're like, oh, this is horrible, and you'll correct it and you'll fix it, and you won't have that experience if you just fly, up, down, up, down.
Yep. So this airplane, and caveats there is what I'll mention is some of my customers, they know they're not going to be able to have the commitment to that either they don't care as much or it's just they don't have the time. So they're not able to train to proficiency. And so normally what they'll do is, but let's say they work to get their private pilot's license, they'll hire a pilot to sit in the seat with them and make sure they're safe and nothing, they're not going to do anything that really gets them in trouble or hurts their family. So you don't need to have that total level of commitment, but if you are going to be the sole pilot flying, you need to actually be the pilot in the seat. And that's what I love about your mindset of, I'm not just going to be a bare minimum pilot, do the bare minimum, right? Just to keep this happening because it's a benefit to most people. It's a means to an end, right? They have a beach house on somewhere, and this saves them a significant amount of time. Or they're a business owner and they have like multiple location units, and they can take the plane and go visit all their locations in one day and still eat with their family, or it's impossible with the airlines. And so it means to an end. That's okay. Just got to know that you need to maintain proficiency and take it seriously. Otherwise, I'd recommend hire a professional pilot to at least sit in the seat. You can still run the radios, still do the things, but you've at least got somebody there to make sure you're safe. So it is an option. So this plane, walk me through. You and I together, we've done a ton of work on this plane.
Both planes.
Yeah, that's right.
But yes.
This plane was pretty much, let's start with like what it means to you and then what your vision is for it. Because when we got it, it was like just bone stock.
Yeah. Yeah, and I loved it. It had all the same military panel that it had in the 50s. And God, I love it. I didn't want to change anything about it. I love that it's got a 0470 Continental engine, and it's got 225 horses in it, and it's very underpowered for the size plane it is. But I love that because when I'm doing aerobatics, having a small engine, you've got to be better. You've got to know your P's and Q's. You don't have a lot of engine that can rescue you out of a bad situation. And so I actually thought that was good. It challenged me. John told me, he's like, stay with this engine. It'll make you a better pilot. It'll make you a better aerobatic pilot. And so I didn't want to change anything, not one thing. And then I started, because I loved it. Plus, when you just buy it, you don't want to start changing a bunch of things. Like you said, it was basically mothballed. So we need to put, like 50, I think we probably put at least close to 50 hours before I did any major serious cross country on the plane. But I didn't want to change it. And, but then I started flying with the T-34s and doing cross countries. And, most T-34s that are flying today, not all, but most have at least a fuel-injected Continental 550 of some variant. And so all the guys I flew with had a big engine, so I had engine envy. But, I didn't need it to fly formation because that's not the point is, you fly to the slowest engine when you're flying formation. So I could still keep up with them. But I started thinking about, I'm doing a lot of cross countries. And by that point I was had my instrument rating. And I'm going to fly-ins, air shows, and I'm flying sometimes in IMC with 1950s technology. And I waited, and I gnashed my teeth, and I didn't want to do it, but I finally made a decision, okay, if I'm going to fly cross-country, I need to have a better platform, a safer platform. And so we upgraded the panel, all glass, and so I had that done. And same panel configuration that I have in the Saratoga. You did both of them. So we flew with that for a long time, and I just now decided, these are investments for me. I've been lucky, been very lucky because I've taken people's advice, and I found 2 planes that had really good bones. And now I've invested a lot in them, and if you ever do a P&L sheet on your plane on what you've invested and what you can sell it for and what you've, in terms of insurance and hangar fees and maintenance and fuels, you're always going to be in the red. But I will sell these planes for more than I paid for them because of how I've kept them up maintenance-wise and upgraded them. And so it only made sense for me to, pull the trigger on this engine upgrade. And thank God I did, because the STCs for these engine upgrades, I basically got the last one and we had to piecemeal it together with the help and work of Randy Long at Long Aviation down in Texas. He has taken me under his wing and has walked me through the whole process along with all the T-34 guys. I mean, I probably spent at least a year picking their brains on what it takes to do an engine upgrade, and talking to Danny Blackwell, who is the forefront in T-34s. His Blackwell Aviation did all the upgrades for T-34s for years and years and years, and he's retired, but he's still a wealth of information, and we fly with him all the time, and he's awesome. Lieutenant Dan is what we call him. And but yeah, I did a lot of research, and I finally pulled the trigger and was lucky enough to get a Continental IO 550R, same engine basically that's in Cirrus. And so, and then with Randy, we had to salvage. I had to cut apart 2 Beechcraft Bonanza 836s just to get the structural components to beef up the keel and the structural integrity of the plane, just to be able to hold the 550. So it's been an odyssey. But I'm lucky I've got you, and we've got Phil, who's a savant when it comes to fabrication and building, and he has taken this on. And this is a family plane. And when I say the family, I'm saying the James Spearman aircraft family. We have sweat and blood and tears. We'll never get rid of this plane for what we've invested in it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that the other day. That plane, some of the most important people in my life all had a part in, right? So you bought it, and you and I working together in this plane and flying it to the air shows that we've done so far and having fun. Dave and I, getting it going.
Yeah.
Cassidy did a mural on one side, my wife, and then Phil, who's my director of maintenance at the shop, best mechanic I'll probably ever encounter, is doing over a few hundred hours worth of sheet metal and fabricating.
Yeah.
So yeah, this plane it's really special. It's gonna be awesome once we get it done.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Yep. Well, Lee, thank you so much. I think it's important for people. If you're out there listening on how you can get into ownership, you definitely can do it. There's lots of resources out there for you to do it, and I encourage you. And obviously, as the aviation community grows, that's good for everybody involved. And so I encourage you to go out there, find the resources, and purchase an airplane and learn how to fly. You definitely can do it. Obviously, I'm here. You can reach out at www.spearmanaircraft.com. We've got a forum on the page there. I'm hoping to have a book out this year that's kind of like Aviation 101 that would kind of walk you through these key terms like pre-buy, all these things that would get you through your first year of aircraft ownership. So thank you so much for listening in. Lee, thank you again for being here.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. And please like and subscribe.